The gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Garrett.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to hit on a few things, and I hate to be constrained so by time, but each other member has as well. First, I would commend the Chief on his suggestion as it relates to criminal enhancements for certain things. I think we have a criminal justice situation in this country that begs reform. We're happy to be moving on in a bipartisan manner toward that. We don't necessarily need new crimes. We need to enforce the ones that are on the books, but an enhancement makes real sense. It's not giving you that burden at trial. Secondly, the mask discussions, the guns discussions, et cetera. I am loath in this body to suggest a federal legislative answer to what should be doctrinally and federalism-wise a state level or local level problem. Now, I'm sympathetic to the arguments made by the folks on the panel that indeed localities and states should be empowered to make these decisions for themselves, but I would hate, and I can assure you I would not vote in favor of a federal mask law. It's draconian in its nature and perhaps in its application, and I don't even want to contemplate it. Having said that, I have no problem with the locality enforcing time, place, manner restrictions on otherwise protected rights. And tertiarily, Rabbi Cooper, I would correct you and respect where you say Hezbollah is not a state actor, but for the IRGC in Iran, there is no Hezbollah. Hezbollah came to be 3 years after the Iranian Revolution, and that while they are not a direct state actor,
they're an actor of a state.
Yes, sir. And again, that's with all due respect and no disrespect intended. To Mr. Cohen, you gave a number of the number of users on the website Stormfront, which is a Nazi affiliate, National Socialist affiliated website. Prior to and after the Obama administration, do you remember those numbers off the top of your head?
I do.
What were they?
In 2008, it was 140,000 registered users.
Yes, sir.
And today, over 330,000. That doesn't mean there are many millions of visitors.
I got
These
so
are people
little time.
registered.
I'm not trying to be rude, right? You got millions of visitors, but you've almost doubled your registration. We wouldn't prescribe that, though. That's not a result of the Obama administration.
Oh no! As I said, it's it's the continuing backlash to our country's changing demographics.
So, well, I think that's your opinion.
That's correct.
With due respect. And so, are you familiar what type of organization is the most prominent and preeminent numerically on your hate watch list of 900 and some odd groups?
I think it would probably be the Daily Stormer or the Nation of Islam.
No, I mean by number. How many?
That's what I was trying to answer.
So I'm sorry. Go ahead, real quick.
I was saying it was probably be the current count would probably be the Daily Stormer or the Nation of Islam.
So by definition, on your list, about 22% of the entire list are black separatist groups.
That's correct.
Right. And again, I don't. I mean, look. Hate is hate is hate is hate is.
I agree.
When we moved to put in a law to make Barbara John's Day a holiday in Virginia, one of my colleagues said that's black history. I said you can't have it. That's American history. We need to know that. And Simon Wiesenthal, I think, was wise in his words to suggest that for our benefit we should learn from the Jewish tragedy because the next victims very well may not be Jewish. And so that's the point that I make, that there's been an uptick. In fact, in 2000, the number of black separatist groups was about 1/12 of your list. Is that about right?
Remember the ratio.
Well, off your website, it would indicate 48 out of 610 extremist groups listed by Hate Watch in 2000 were black separatists, and now it's about almost 200 out of about 900.
Right, and we report those numbers.
And again, this isn't President Obama's fault.
Well,
it's not, is it? I mean, I don't think it is.
I wasn't claiming it was fault. I was trying to explain.
Well, I guess what I'm suggesting is that there's no doubt, right, that there are real, live, living, breathing Nazis. And tragically, we saw them in my congressional district. But to ascribe the presence of despicable, reprehensible individuals who can't grasp the basic concept of Dr. King's premise that we should judge individuals based on the content of their character, not the color of their skin, but to say, well, this is because of the rhetoric of one individual, I think oversimplifies the problem, correct?
Well, I'm not sure I'm not sure I was guilty of what you're suggesting.
I'm not suggesting you were. If someone were to say that the prevalence of these groups is because the rhetoric of one individual, that would be oversimplifying the problem, would it not?
Depending on the individual, I think it does.
So here's my concern, because what your organization has done and done well is attack evil in the form of things like the Klan. However, would you be shocked if I told you that from the public records, as it relates to the leadership of your organization, the political giving is almost exclusively and to the tune of almost 100% in one direction? Would that surprise you?
I don't think it's accurate.
If I were to tell you that it were, would that surprise you?
It would. We have many Republican donors.
No, sir. I'm talking about the gifts from the people in your organization to political causes.
Oh, I think that's absolutely true. I'm sure that's right.
Okay.
And there are not that many people in our in Southern Poverty Law Center who make political contributions.
But some do, and
Sure.
it wouldn't surprise you to learn that they were almost exclusively in one direction.
It would not.
Okay. And you've worked with other groups, for example, Media Matters, the Center for New Community, and Rethink Media to come up with lists, correct?
We have.
Okay. Would it surprise you if I were to tell you that based on public records, the political giving of the leadership of those organizations was also almost exclusively in one direction?
No, it would
Okay.
not.
And would you contest the assertion, and I would categorize National Socialism.
You haven't given up your days as a trial lawyer, have you,
sir.
Mr. Garrett?
No,
Go
sir.
ahead.
But again, it's an interesting paradigm I find myself in because I respect what you do.
Thank you.
I'm concerned with how you're doing it. And here's where I'm going with this. I think it's a fair historical fact to say that the deadliest collective force in human history, probably just after National Socialism, would be communism, which inarguably is a dogma of the left. I am not ascribing values to anyone. I am suggesting, however, that it troubles those to see an entity that has essentially been de facto made responsible for determining what is and isn't hate, that skews almost exclusively, as do their collaborators, in a particular direction. And so I guess I admonish you to listen to folks like Mr. Perry, who says, I don't even remember the name of the organization, are you familiar with them, and become familiar with them. Now,
I'm not sure who you're talking about, Mr. Perry. I'm sorry. Oh, I'm sorry, Congressman.
It's okay. And so let me finish, because I've just kind of poked at you, but it's not with
just
malice.
a little bit.
But it's not with malice. You deserve credit at SPLC for being the first group to point out, for example, that Jason Kessler, who was the organizer of the Unite the Right rally, with which I would take exception to the name, because again, I'm an individualist in the Randian sense. I think the individual is the ultimate minority, and everyone has a right to be left alone so long as they're not hurting someone else. But you were the first people to point out that his previous affiliations had been with the Occupy movement. And you deserve credit for that, right? And so I hope and ask that you recognize that hatred in any form is hatred, that violence in any form is violence, and that victims in any form are victims.
And we always have.
And I encourage you to continue to, but the perception by outside individuals, and I think based on life experience, is that if all the leadership of an organization skews in a particular political direction, there might be a bias, which then gives rise to a lack of credibility for what you do that should be important work. Do you understand why that might be a concern of people?
I understand why it's a concern to you.
Yeah, well, do you understand why that might be a concern of people?
Look, the liberal tradition is an inclusive one. Hate is the opposite of that liberal tradition of inclusivity. So it's not surprising to me that people at the Southern Poverty Law Center, people at other inclusive organizations tend to give money to liberal organizations. It seems obvious to me.
Well, again, we could sit and discuss the origins of classical liberalism versus modern liberalism all day long, but my life philosophy is treat everyone as you'd want to be treated.
Of course.
And do no harm.
Absolutely.
And that the Jeffersonian construct of liberty should be adhered to, which is so long as you're not hurting someone else, who cares who you sleep with? Who cares how you worship? Et cetera, et cetera. But it strikes me as I look at the groups that are chosen, Liberty Council, Family Research Council, when Flanagan walks in with Chick-fil-A sandwiches to rub in the faces of his victims, and it's not your fault.
That's absolutely true.
But I mean, you know, I hope that the important work you do not be co-opted by any ideological drive that causes you to miss other threats.
Well, I appreciate your concern about our work, and I am sure that if you knew as much as we did about the Family Research Council, you too would keep them at arm's length.
Well, I'm way over time. I would love to have the opportunity to sit and talk more. I thank all three of the panelists.
Look forward to seeing you in Charlottesville.
Yeah, and invite you guys to come by the office anytime. Give me a little bit of advance notice so I can make sure I can be there. But thank you. Thank you.